Part 2. Sunlight streamed through the stand of poplars. A meadow was visible beyond the trees, green stalks splattered with the brightness of bluebells, daisies, and phlox. A robin pranced near the base of one tree, searching for insects. It did not see the sinewy predator stalking it, eyes intent, muscles taut. The bird turned its back, and the stalker sprang. Jones slammed into the solido of the robin, neither acquiring prey nor disturbing the image, which continued its blithe quest for imaged insects. Shaking his head violently, the tomcat staggered away from the wall. Ripley sat on a nearby bench regarding this cat play. Dumb cat, don't you know a solido by now when you see one? Although maybe she shouldn't be too hard on the cat. Solido design had improved during the last 57 years. Everything had been improved during the last 57 years. Everything except for her and Jones. Glass doors sealed the atrium off from the rest of Gateway Station. The expensive solido of a North American temperate forest was set off by potted plants and sickly grass underfoot. The solido looked more real than the real plants, but at least the latter had an honest smell. She leaned slightly towards one pot. Dirt and moisture and growing things. Of cabbages and kings, she mused dourly. Horsepucky. She wanted off Gateway. Earth was temptingly near, and she longed to put blue sky between herself and the malign emptiness of space. Two of the glass doors that sealed off the atrium parted to admit Carter Burke. For a moment she found herself regarding him as a man and not just a company cipher. Maybe that was a sign that she was returning to normal. Her appraisal of him was mitigated by the knowledge that when the Nostromo had departed on its ill-fated voyage, he was 2 decades short of being born. It shouldn't have made any difference. They were approximately the same physical age. Sorry. Always the cheery smile. I've been running behind all morning. Finally managed to get away. Ripley never had been one for small talk. Now more than ever, life seemed too precious to waste on inconsequential banter. Why couldn't people just say what they had to say, instead of dancing for 5 minutes around the subject? Have they located my daughter yet? Burke looked uncomfortable. Well, I was going to wait until after the inquest. I've waited 57 years. I'm impatient, so humor me. He nodded, set down his carrying case, and popped the lid. He fumbled for a minute with the contents before producing several sheets of thin plastic. Is she... Burke spoke as he read from one of the sheets. Amanda Ripley McLaren. Married name, I guess. Age 66 at... Time of death. That was 2 years ago. There's a whole history here. Nothing spectacular or notable. Details of a pleasant, ordinary life. Like the kind most of us lead, I expect. I'm sorry. He passed over the sheets, studied Ripley's face as she scanned the printouts. I guess this is my morning for being sorry. Ripley studied the holographic image imprinted on one of the sheets. It showed a round, slightly pale woman in her mid-60s. Could have been anyone's aunt. There was nothing distinctive about the face, nothing that leapt out and shouted with familiarity. It was impossible to reconcile the picture of this older woman with the memory of the little girl she'd left behind. Amy, she whispered. Burke still held a couple of sheets, read quietly as she continued to stare at the hologram. Cancer. They still haven't licked all varieties of that one. Body was cremated. Interred, Westlake Repository, Little Chute, Wisconsin. No children. Ripley looked past him, towards the forest solido, but not at it. She was staring at the invisible landscape of the past. I promised her I'd be home for her birthday. Her 11th birthday. I sure missed that one. She glanced again at the picture. Well, she'd already learned to take my promises with a grain of salt, when it came to flight schedules anyway. Burke nodded, trying to be sympathetic. That was difficult for him under ordinary circumstances, much more so this morning. At least he had the sense to keep his mouth shut instead of muttering the usual polite inanities. You always think you can make it up to somebody. Later, you know? She took a deep breath. But now I never can. I never can. The tears came then, long overdue, 57 years overdue. She sat there on the bench and sobbed softly to herself, alone now in a different kind of space. Finally, Burke patted her reassuringly on the shoulder, uncomfortable at this display and trying hard not to show it. The hearing convenes at 09:30. You don't want to be late. It wouldn't make a good first impression. She nodded, rose. Jonesy, come here. Meowing, the cat sauntered over and allowed her to pick him up. She wiped self-consciously at her eyes. I've got to change. It won't take long. She rubbed her nose against the cat's back, a small outrage it suffered in silence. Want me to walk you back to your room? Sure, why not? He turned and started for the proper corridor. The doors parted to permit them egress from the atrium. You know, that cat's something of a privilege here. They don't allow pets on Gateway. Jones isn't a pet. She scratched the tom behind the ears. He's a survivor. As Ripley promised, she was ready in plenty of time. Burke elected to wait outside her private room, studying his own reports until she emerged. The transformation was impressive. Gone was the pale, waxy skin. Gone the bitterness of expression and the uncertain stride. Determination? He wondered as they headed for the central corridor. Or just clever makeup. Neither of them said anything until they neared the sublevel where the hearing room was located. What are you going to tell them? He finally asked her. What's to tell that hasn't been told? You read my deposition. It's complete and accurate. No embellishments. It didn't need any embellishments. Look, I believe you, and there are going to be some heavyweights in there, and every one of them is going to try to pick holes in your story. You got feds, you got Interstellar Commerce Commission, you got Colonial Administration, insurance company guys. I get the picture. Just tell them what happened. The important thing is to stay cool and unemotional. Sure, she thought. All of her friends and shipmates and relatives were dead, and she'd lost 57 years of reality in an unrestoring sleep. Cool and unemotional. Sure. Despite her determination, by midday she was anything but cool and collected. Repetition of the same questions, the same idiotic disputations of the facts that she'd reported, the same exhaustive examination of minor points that left the major ones untouched, all combined to render her frustrated and angry. As she spoke to the somber inquisitors, the large vidscreen behind her was printing out mugshots and dossiers. She was glad it was behind her, because the faces were those of the Nostromo's crew. There was Parker, grinning like a goon, and Brett, placid and bored as the camera did its duty. Kane was there too, and Lambert. Ash, the traitor, his soulless face enriched with programmed false piety. Dallas. Better the picture behind her, like the memories. "Do you have earwax or what?" she finally snapped. "We've been here 3 hours. How many different ways do you want me to tell the same story? You'd think it'd sound better in Swahili? Get me a translator and we'll do it in Swahili. I'd try Japanese, but I'm out of practice. Also, out of patience. How long does it take you to make up your collective mind?" Van Leeuwen steepled his fingers and frowned. His expression was as grey as his suit. It was approximated by the looks on the faces of his fellow board members. There were 8 of them on the official board of inquiry, and not a friendly one in the lot. Executives, administrators, adjusters. How could she convince them? They weren't human beings. They were expressions of bureaucratic disapproval. Phantoms. She was used to dealing with reality. The intricacies of politi-corporate maneuvering were beyond her. "This isn't as simple as you seem to believe," he told her quietly. "Look at it from our perspective. You freely admit to detonating the engines of, and thereby destroying, an M-class interstellar freighter, a rather expensive piece of hardware." The insurance investigator was possibly the unhappiest member of the board. 42 million in adjusted dollars. That's minus payload, of course. Engine detonation wouldn't leave anything salvageable, even if we could locate the remains after 57 years. Van Leeuwen nodded absently before continuing. "It's not as if we think you're lying. The lifeboat shuttle flight recorder corroborates some elements of your account, the least controversial ones. That the Nostromo set down on LV-426, an unsurveyed and previously unvisited planet at the time and date specified. That repairs were made. That it resumed its course after a brief layover and was subsequently set for self-destruct, and that this, in fact, occurred. That the order for engine overload was provided by you for reasons unknown." "Look, I told you!" Van Leeuwen interrupted, having heard it before. "It did not, however, contain any entries concerning the hostile alien lifeform you allegedly picked up during your short stay on the planet's surface." "We didn't pick it up," she shot back. "Like I told you, it..." She broke off, staring at the hollow faces gazing stonily back at her. She was wasting her breath. This wasn't a real board of inquiry. This was a formal wake, a post-internment party. The object here wasn't to ascertain the truth in hopes of vindication. It was to smooth out the rough spots and make the landscape all nice and neat again. And there wasn't a thing she could do about it, she saw now. Her fate had been decided before she'd set foot in the room. The inquiry was a show, the questions a sham, to satisfy the record. Then somebody's gotten to it and doctored the recorder. A competent tech could do that in an hour. Who had access to it? The representative of the Extrasolar Colonization Administration was a woman on the ungenerous side of 50. Previously, she'd looked bored. Now she just sat in her chair and shook her head slowly. Would you listen to yourself for a minute? Do you really expect us to believe some of the things you've been telling us? Too much hypersleep can do all kinds of funny things to the mind. Ripley glared at her, furious at being so helpless. You want to hear some funny things? Van Leeuwen stepped in verbally. The analytical team that went over your shuttle centimeter by centimeter found no physical evidence of the creature you describe or anything like it. No damage to the interior of the craft. No etching of metal surfaces that might have been caused by an unknown corrosive substance. Ripley had kept control all morning, answering the most inane queries with patience and understanding. The time for being reasonable was at an end, and so was her store of patience. That's because I blew it out of the airlock. She subsided a little at this declaration and was greeted by the silence of the tomb. Like I said. The insurance man leaned forward and peered along the desk at the ECA representative. Are there any species like this hostile organism native to LV-426? No. The woman exuded confidence. It's a rock. No indigenous life bigger than a simple virus. Certainly nothing complex. Not even a flatworm. Never was, never will be. Ripley ground her teeth as she struggled to stay calm. I told you it wasn't indigenous. She tried to meet their eyes, but they were having none of it, so she concentrated on Van Leeuwen and the ECA rep. There was a signal coming from the surface. The Nostromo scanner picked it up and woke us from hypersleep, as per standard regulations. When we traced it, we found an alien spacecraft like nothing you or anyone else has ever seen. That was on the recorder too. The ship was a derelict, crashed, abandoned. We never did find out. We homed in on its beacon. We found the ship's pilot, also like nothing previously encountered. He was dead in his chair with a hole in his chest the size of a welder's tank. Maybe the story bothered the ECA rep. Or maybe she was just tired of hearing it for the umpteenth time. Whatever, she felt it was her place to respond. To be perfectly frank, we've surveyed over 300 worlds, and no one's ever reported the existence of a creature which, using your words, and she bent to read from her copy of Ripley's formal statement, gestates in a living human host and has concentrated molecular acid for blood. Ripley glanced towards Burke, who sat silent and tight-lipped at the far end of the table. He was not a member of the Board of Inquiry, so he had kept silent throughout the questioning. Not that he could do anything to help her. Everything depended on how her official version of the Nostromo's demise was received. Without the corroborating evidence from the shuttle's flight recorder, the board had nothing to go on but her word, and it had been made clear from the start how little weight they decided to allot to that. She wondered anew who had doctored the recorder and why. Or maybe it simply had malfunctioned on its own. At this point, it didn't much matter. She was tired of playing the game. Look, I can see where this is going. She half smiled, an expression devoid of amusement. This was hardball time, and she was going to finish it out, even though she had no chance of winning. The whole business with the android, why we followed the beacon in the first place. It all adds up, though I can't prove it. She looked down the length of the table, and now she did grin. Somebody's covering their ass, and it's been decided that I'm going to take them up for it. Okay, fine. But there's one thing you can't change. One fact you can't doctor away. Those things exist. You can wipe me out, but you can't wipe that out. Back on that planet is an alien ship, and on that ship are thousands of eggs. Thousands! Do you understand? Do you have any idea what that implies? I suggest you go back out there with an expedition and find it, using the flight recorder's data, and you find it fast. Find it and deal with it, preferably with an orbital nuke, before one of your survey teams comes back with a little surprise. Thank you, Officer Ripley, Van Leeuwen began. That will be... Because just one of those things, she went on, stepping on him, managed to kill my entire crew within 12 hours of hatching. The administrator rose. Ripley wasn't the only one in the room who was out of patience. Thank you. That will be all. That's not all. She stood and glared at him. If those things get back here, that will be all. Then you can just kiss it goodbye, Jack. Just kiss it goodbye. The ECA representative turned calmly to the administrator. I believe we have enough information on which to base a determination. I think it's time to close this inquest and retire for deliberation. Van Leeuwen glanced at his fellow board members. He might as well have been looking at mirror images of himself, for all the superficial differences of face and build. They were of one mind. That was something that could not be openly expressed, however. It would not look good in the record. Above all, everything had to look good in the record. Gentlemen, ladies. Acquiescent nods. He looked back down at the subject under discussion. Dissection was more like it, she thought sourly. Officer Ripley, if you'd excuse us, please. Not likely. Trembling with frustration, she turned to leave the room. As she did so, her eyes fastened on the picture of Dallas that was staring blankly back down from the video screen. Captain Dallas, friend Dallas, companion Dallas, dead Dallas. She strode out angrily. There was nothing more she could do or say. She had been found guilty, and now they were going to go through the motions of giving her an honest trial. Formalities. The company and its friends loved their formalities. Nothing wrong with death and tragedy, as long as you could safely suck all the emotion out of it. Then it would be safe to put in the annual report. So the inquest had to be held, emotion translated into sanitized figures in neat columns, a verdict to be rendered, but not too loudly, lest the neighbors overhear. None of which really bothered Ripley. The imminent demise of her career didn't bother her. What she couldn't forgive was the blind stupidity being flaunted by the all-powerful in the room she'd left. So they didn't believe her. Given their type of mindset and the absence of solid evidence, she could understand that. But to ignore her story totally, to refuse to check it out, that she could never forgive. Because there was a lot more at stake than one lousy life, one unspectacular career as a flight transport officer. And they didn't care. It didn't show a profit or a loss, so they didn't care. She booted the wall next to Burke as he bought coffee and donuts from the vending machine in the hall. The machine thanked him politely as it accepted his credit card. Like practically everything else on Gateway Station, the machine had no odor. Neither did the black liquid it poured. As for the alleged donuts, they might once have flown over a wheat field. You had them eating out of your hand, kiddo. Burke was trying to cheer her up. She was grateful for the attempt, even as it failed. But there was no reason to take her anger out on him. Multiple sugars and artificial creamer gave the ersatz coffee some taste. They had their minds made up before I even went in there. I've wasted an entire morning. They should have had scripts printed up for everyone to read from, including me. Would have been easier just to recite what they wanted to hear instead of trying to remember the truth. She glanced at him. You know what they think? I can imagine. He bit into a donut. They think I'm a head case. You are a head case, he told her cheerfully. Have a donut. Chocolate or buttermilk? She eyed the pre-cooked Taurus he proffered distastefully. You can taste the difference? Not really, but the colors are nice. She didn't grin, but she didn't sneer at him either. The deliberations didn't take long. No reason why they should, she thought, as she re-entered the room and resumed her seat. Burke took his place on the far side of the chamber. He started to wink at her, thought better of it, and aborted the gesture. She recognized the eye twitch for what it almost became, and was glad he hadn't followed through. Van Leeuwen cleared his throat. He didn't find it necessary to look to his fellow board members for support. It is the finding of this Board of Inquiry that Warrant Officer Ellen Ripley, NOC 14672, has acted with questionable judgment, and is therefore declared unfit to hold an ICC license as a commercial flight officer. If any of them expected some sort of reaction from the condemned, they were disappointed. She sat there and stared silently back at them, tight-lipped and defiant. More likely, they were relieved. Emotional outbursts would have to be recorded. Van Leeuwen continued, unaware that Ripley had reattired him in black cape and hood. Said license is hereby suspended indefinitely, pending review at a future date to be specified later. He cleared his throat, then his conscience. In view of the unusual length of time spent by the defendant in hypersleep, and the concomitant indeterminable effects on the human nervous system, no criminal charges will be filed at this time. At this time, Ripley thought humorlessly. That was corporatese for, keep your mouth shut and stay away from the media, and you'll still get to collect your pension. You are released on your own recognizance for a 6-month period of psychometric probation, to include monthly review by an approved ICC psychiatric tech and treatment or medication as may be prescribed. It was short, neat, and not at all sweet, and she took it all without a word, until Van Leeuwen had finished and departed. Burke saw the look in her eye and tried to restrain her. Lay off, he whispered to her. She threw off his hand and continued up the corridor. It's over. Right, she called back to him as she lengthened her stride. So what else can they do to me? She caught up with Van Leeuwen as he stood waiting for the elevator. Why won't you check out LV426? He glanced back at her. Ms. Ripley, it wouldn't matter. The decision of the board is final. The heck with the board's decision. We're not talking about me now. We're talking about the next poor souls to find that ship. Just tell me why you won't check it out. Because I don't have to, he told her brusquely. The people who live there have checked it out years ago, and they've never reported any hostile organism or alien ship. Do you think I'm a complete fool? Do you think the board wouldn't seek some sort of verification, if only to protect ourselves from future inquiries? And by the way, they call it Acheron now. 57 years. Long time. People could accomplish a lot in 57 years. Build, move around, establish new colonies. Ripley struggled with the import of the administrator's words. What are you talking about? What people? Van Leeuwen joined the other passengers in the elevator car. Ripley put an arm between the doors to keep them from closing. The door's sensors obediently waited for her to remove it. Terraformers, Van Leeuwen explained. Planetary engineers. Much has happened in that field while you slept, Ripley. We've made significant advances, great strides. The cosmos is not a hospitable place, but we're changing that. It's what we call a shake-and-bake colony. They set up atmosphere processors to make the air breathable. We can do that now, efficiently and economically, as long as we have some kind of resident atmosphere to work with. Hydrogen, argon, methane is best. Acheron is swimming in methane, with a portion of oxygen and sufficient nitrogen for beginning bonding. It's nothing now. The air's barely breathable, but given time, patience, and hard work, there'll be another habitable world out there ready to comfort and succor humanity. At a price, of course. Ours is not a philanthropic institution, though we like to think of what we do as furthering mankind's progress. It's a big job, decades worth. They've already been there more than 20 years. Peacefully. Why didn't you tell me? Because it was felt that the information might have biased your testimony. Personally, I don't think it would have made a bit of difference. You obviously believe what you believe. But some of my colleagues were of differing opinion. I doubt it would have changed our decision. The doors tried to close, and she slammed them apart. The other passengers began to exhibit signs of annoyance. How many colonists? Van Leeuwen's brow furrowed. At last count, I'd say 60, maybe 70 families. We found that people work better when they're not separated from their loved ones. It's more expensive, but it pays for itself in the long run. And it gives the community the feeling of a real colony instead of merely an engineering outpost. It's tough on some of the women and the kids, but when their tour of duty ends, they can retire comfortably. Everyone benefits from the arrangement. Sweet Jesus, Ripley whispered. One of the passengers leaned forward, spoke irritably. Do you mind? Absently, she dropped her arm to her side. Freed of their responsibility, the doors closed quietly. Van Leeuwen had already forgotten her, and she him. She was looking instead into her imagination, not liking what she saw there.